topic is the Harlem Renaissance, the art of black America. And for our final guest tonight, we're talking to Mr. GRidley3, who is an international artist for the last 25 or 30 years involved in art of the Renaissance at Tennessee State University, Fisk University, institutions throughout the South. And let me welcome you to comments, Mr. Ridley.
Thank you, Dr.
Earlier, we spoke to administrators of Cheekwood and to Dr. Mitchell in reference to the Harlem Renaissance exhibit that will be here quite recent, within the next several weeks. And I'd like to continue our conversation by having you to give us some information in reference to some of the artists. But before that, your relationship with the Harlem Renaissance.
First of all, I'd like to say that the early two comments by Ms. Cirillo and Professor Mitchell were well taken and beautifully done. Of course, my connection with the Harlem Renaissance comes through one of the artists that's represented in the exhibition, Aaron Douglas. Aaron Douglas was my professor at Fisk University in 1945 to 1949. In the aftermath of World War II. So I'm kind of what you might think in terms of as the second generation off of the Harlem Renaissance. My teachers were also Honor Von Thoms, and quite naturally all of Aaron's friends in New York as well as Fisk were my mentors, and I had the pleasure of coming in contact with them and knowing them on a personal note because I was a student at Fisk University under Aaron Douglas.
Now, where does Mr. Douglas stand in terms of the Harlem Renaissance and art during that period?
Well, Mr. Douglas was among the most important artists, visual artists, during the Harlem Renaissance. There were others, like Palmer Hayden, William H. Johnson, the very eminent Archibald Motley, Meta Warwick Fuller, Augusta Savage, William H. Johnson, and he was visual. He was more visual because he illustrated for the Opportunity magazine that Dr. Mitchell mentioned a few minutes ago. You know, Du Bois was the editor, I believe. And Aaron did a lot of illustrations for magazines and articles, and also illustration for books written by his friends like Langston and James Weldon Johnson, and he was more visual. That's the reason why they call him the dean of the Harlem Renaissance. Okay. It doesn't mean that he was the most important.
Very good, but he was the most visual.
He was the most visual, so he became the most popular.
Very good. As a matter of fact, all of the artists that you've mentioned will probably be a part of the exhibit. And we do have some pictures of the exhibit. And why don't you give us some information relative to the artists and the significance of the work?
Certainly, certainly. So the composition you see now is a crucifixion composition by Aaron Douglas.
Now this is your mentor.
My mentor, my teacher. And it's created in his, he had three particular styles that he worked in. One was basically representational portraiture. In this case, this is his silhouetted profile, frontal torso concept, sort of influenced by the Egyptian style motif. It's a composition relating to somewhat of the profile frontal torso entity, and is owned by William Crosby, Bill Crosby. This is in his...
He has the original for this.
Yeah, this original.
But what about this?
This composition is by Palmer Hayden, and is called The Dress She Wore Was Blue. And it's from Palmer Hayden's John Henry series. It's an oil painting from a series created by Palmer Hayden, one of the artists represented in the Harlem Renaissance show.
Now, is the sledgehammer significant in
Yes, John Henry. John Henry,
the
steel driving man. Man ain't nothing but a man. You know, he named all of his compositions in relationship to the title of the legendary John Henry.
Very good.
Yeah. This composition is by William H. Johnson, and it's the cover for the brochure.
For the Cheekwood exhibit.
For the Cheekwood exhibition. William H. Johnson was a very sophisticated artist who lived in Europe most of his life, but when his wife died, he became very satirical and sort of what we might think in terms of social protest, primitive in his approach to his painting. And this composition is called The Man with the Vest by William H. Johnson. This is a portrait of Alta, Aaron Douglas' wife. Who
now, you knew her personally.
I had the pleasure of knowing her on a personal note from 1945 until she passed in 1962. She was a personal friend of my family, and it's a very beautiful portrait of Alta. Alta was a professor in the city university system and the city school system in New York.
Well, did she live in Nashville?
She lived at 409 Edgecombe. That's the fashionable spot in Harlem, you know. That's Sugar Hill. And they had an apartment unit at 409 Edgecombe where all of the greats lived, such like Joe Louis, Walter White, E. Sims Campbell, and they were all neighbors. And she preferred to live in New York and come down to Nashville to visit Aaron, and during the summer months, Aaron would go to New York and spend his time there during the summer.
Now, what is...
This is Van der Zee, James Van der Zee, that Mr. Rillo mentioned, and I think Dr. Mitchell also mentioned
now, why is he significant?
He, in his photography, in this silver print, he shows the sophistication of blacks. Black wearing apparel, the setting, the motifs in the background tells us that this was a very sophisticated couple. And this composition here, too, 1932 by Van der Zee, shows a couple with their raccoon coats on, the convertible, very fashionable, very elite. And this was the era of the chandelier, candelabra, the Charleston, hot mama age.
Very good. We've got a couple of minutes to go. Now, if you had to sort of summarize the artists that are part of this exhibit, what would you say about them in order to encourage more people to come out and see this and become involved in it?
Go see it.
Go see it.
Go see it. I think if you really want to understand what the era was like, or what the era was like in America, not only for blacks, but for anyone who lived during the 20s, you will see a very beautiful relationship between Andre Breton, or maybe what Dali was doing, or what the Surrealists were doing, what the Primitives were doing, how blacks felt about America. Just go see it and you become a part of the history that's there.
It's history itself, and of course it's not only limited to black people as part of the Renaissance, but it's also something that reaches out much further.
Sure,
very
certainly
good.
So. It's part of America.
Very good. Let me thank you and the other members of the panel, Mr. Ridley, for coming by and giving us that very, very important information. And let me encourage you to go out to see the Harlem Renaissance exhibit and to become a part of this very, very important experience. And again, let me encourage you to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments.